I like to complain that there's way more than I could talk about for the years on this, and I'm serious. So, all right, so I'm going to start with a flag of the Notre Dame cathedrals. Obviously, you know that Our Lady, these are named in honor of her. And I want to give just a quick look at the facade, the west entrances of them, so that you'll recognize them. And then as I go back through some subject matter, I'm going to talk about some of the sculptural programs of her on them. Right, so this isn't forwarding. God. Match that button.
Touch it. Well, there you go. What's that all about?
I'm just glad you're in the room.
I understand. I'm not sure I could say the same, but that's all. Love to say, listen to you, but the technology is getting tiring after a while. I think that works.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
There you go.
I'm gonna get to Rome, but this is the first church that is still standing that was named Notre Dame. And it is one of the most peculiar looking churches. It doesn't really follow the Romanesque pattern of churches. It's certainly not Gothic. The typical pattern would be to have the towers over the right and left portals. The sculptural program is different and it's just very unusual, but it's the first one, the oldest one still standing with her name. There were some earlier ones that I'll go into later. The sculptural program is the story of Mary's life and also the association of Adam and Eve with Christ and Mary. And of course, Christ came to save us from the sins of Adam and Mary from the misbehaving of Eve. And so she's considered the new Mary and Christ, the new Adam. We've seen the skull of Adam at various scenes of Christ, particularly the resurrection. Okay, so you are familiar with, see this. You're familiar with Notre Dame's Paris. This is, in my opinion, the most perfect of all the Gothic cathedrals. It is symmetrical, it's quiet, it's just exquisite. And it, the French Revolution tried to destroy it, but they managed not to. And then, of course, our fire in 2019. I like this view because it shows one of the important features, which is the very short transept. And of course, here, this is on the Ile de la Cité, and here is the Seine. So you can't go much further. And sometimes the transepts are much wider. This is a current photograph from the summer of the reconstruction. And I just heard today on the news coming over that the rooster is back on top and that they have a sprinkler system in it now, a mist. As a fire prevention. So it's supposed to be ready for the Olympics. Yay. It was a miracle. I mean, the whole thing is better. This is Chartres, Notre Dame Chartres, Our Lady of Chartres, sometimes it's called. It was started earlier than Notre Dame. It started in 1145, Notre Dame 1150, and it had a massive fire in 1194. The fire destroyed everything but the west front and the crypt, and one window was managed to be saved, and I'm going to show you the window. And this was, in medieval thinking, the birth of the Virgin because she wanted a new church. Here's a side view. You can see that it's crammed into the city. We don't have that beautiful walk towards the cathedral like you do in Paris. But this age of Gothic architecture brought in all kinds of new architectural features and also engineering features. The buttress and the flying buttress, the increase in the in the groin vaulting, the groin rib vaulting from quatrepartie to sespartie to seppartie. And the church is just rose in height. Notre Dame's 115 feet, Chartres is 118, the nave. Amiens is the tallest at 140 and Rem at 124. So you just saw this increase in, and of course, as it increases, the windows increase, the light increases. And the same place.
The front towers. They
Totally different. The second one is from the 16th century. Which to me makes it, I'm not gonna say anything. This is the west portal of the entrance of Notre Dame. On the left is the Ascension of Christ, and the center is Christ with the four Gospels, symbols of the four Gospels, and on the right, Mary, the Mother of God. And that is, these are the kings and queens and prophets of the Old Testament, and that was supposed to be in association with the French kings being the spiritual descendants of the biblical kings. Amiens, this is the tallest. Again, it has different towers. You can see it gets more lacy. This sort of fretwork, this transparency where you see through it, it looks more fragile, more lacy. I don't know if you like that or not, but it's there. And here is Rem with matching towers. That's sort of a way to identify them. And we're going to spend some time on this portal and the Trumos from Rem and Amiens. Things we know about Mary. This is my very quick review of the first week. We know that she said yes. This is the Annunciation. We know that this is the first Madonna. We know that she was a wonderful mother. She loved her child and was protective of her child. We know that she was a Jewish woman. She was faithful to the church. She was raised in the Jewish church, the temple synagogue. And on the 8th day after his birth, she took him to be circumcised. Here she is meeting with Simeon and Anna. We'll talk about that in a minute. We know that she avoided the massacre of the innocents by leaving Bethlehem and going to Egypt. This is the flight into Egypt. We know that she was concerned terribly over the loss of her son, if you've ever had a missing child. This is where Jesus remained in the temple after Passover. We know that she was a little bossy at the wedding of Cana, where she demanded that he do something, fix the wine, help out. So all of these are typical mother things, right? So, you know, Mother of God, let's focus on that concept for a little bit. We know that she grieved horribly at the crucifixion, as any mother would. And she was with the other apostles, disciples, apostles, when the Holy Spirit came at Pentecost. And this is our clue. This is a fact. This is our clue that she was part of the growing of the early Christian church. Okay, now I'm going into the traditions, the legends, the Apocrypha, the numerous writings on her that are not biblical. We've looked at this. This is the association. This is a 980 sculpture, gold. It did have a wood backing originally, where Mary's holding the apple studded with jewels. And this is the association of Mary as the new Eve. And we know that she was in many altarpieces, and represented as the Madonna many times, particularly in the Gothic and early Renaissance period, even high Renaissance, if you think about Raphael. And she was considered an intercessor. You prayed to her, and she was physically present and could receive and hear your prayers. And we know that in this sculpture of Michelangelo, there was an attempt to convey to us her perpetual virginity, showing her as a young woman holding an older man. Okay, this is today. The death of Mary called the Dormition, the Assumption of the Virgin, the crowning of the Virgin as Queen of Heaven, and the Sacra Conversations. Dormition. Okay, Nancy, you can help me out a little at any point in this, but
Sure.
so this is probably the earliest story of the myth or the legend of Mary, the continuation. The Dormition the earliest writing was from Saint Irenaeus, and he died in 2020. So somewhere in the early 3rd century. And it was the account of John after Pentecost, and of course, Mary was living with John. John went to Ephesus to preach, and apparently Mary died there. It says that Mary died 11 years after the death of Christ, which would make her, depending on how old you believe she was at the death of Christ, this would make her about 44 to 48 years old. And in this legend, the angel Gabriel comes to Mary, and he tells her that her death will come in 3 days. And in 3 days, he comes back on a cloud, and he says to her, "Where are you going?" And she removes her girdle and says, "Receive this, my friend," and she disappears. So the girdle, in Roman times was a leather band worn, a sign of power or authority, or to hold some kind of knife or whatever. It also, if it was sackcloth, it could be a sign of mourning or sorrow. Or if it was linen, in probably her case, it was a wrap that was configured as part of a garment or a tunic. So that is one of the legends, and this is from the Maesta altarpiece. I'll show you where it is. It's right here. And this whole altarpiece, remember we looked at it at Siena Cathedral Museum now, and it's all about the story of Mary and her life. Old Testament prophets of it. So I want to also mention that Dormition means it really started as a feast in the Eastern Church in the 6th century and matriculated to the West in the 7th. And Dormition really means to fall asleep. And it was believed correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy, it was believed that she fell asleep without pain or suffering and was buried. And after that, she was assumed into heaven. So we're going to look at the death and the Assumption. And there are some variations, so we'll get to those. But this is one of the earlier pieces, and I want you to notice that she's surrounded by the apostles. There are apparently still 12 of them living. And this is Christ holding her, and she is received or taken, assumed into heaven as a child. And her soul is represented as a child, a baby, or a really young infant. So that's who you will see in almost every representation of the Dormition. You will always see Christ holding her, or usually you'll see it. So keep an eye on this. This is one of the early beautiful ones. And then they became very popular on the cathedrals. On the Notre Dame cathedrals would show her Dormition and also her Assumption. And this one is from the Royal Portal of the Virgin at Notre Dame, Paris. And she is held as she's being lowered into her tomb by two angels, and she's surrounded by the apostles. And this is from the royal portal of the Virgin in Chartres. You see the Dormition on the lower left side and the Assumption on the right lower side. And at the top, she is being crowned into heaven. This one I love from Strasbourg. It's more active. We see the stiffness of that can be the stiffness of the Baroque and Gothic, not Baroque, Romanesque Gothic sculptures where they're stiff and like a column, most of them, even though they're carved in the round. But this one, they're just like leaning out from under the arch, and they have different expressions, and particularly of grief. And this is Christ, and this is John. This, of course, who do you think that is? She's always in our scene as grieving and expressive and dramatic.
Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene. This Giotto again. I have to bring him up because he's so significant in the path of art through the sophistication of it, through the developments in painting. You can see, first of all, here, there is some Byzantine hierarchical detail here. Christ as larger than the other figures, a little out of proportion. But look at the perspective here. This is new for Giotto. This is from the same church, the Ognissanti, which is All Saints in Florence, that the Madonna, the big Madonna that you saw last week was from, and it was painted in the same year, 1310. This is 4 years after he finished the Arena Chapel. But this is interesting. There are lots of kind of fun details in this. Saint Andrew is sprinkling holy water on her. We have another one here holding the incense censer, sprinkling it. Look at this one, this figure with the thumbs in the pants. These two are conversing. This one has a mouth open, like she or he is almost singing or speaking. It just has a life that the others have seemed more frozen. It has a little more personality, I'll call it. And this is timber on panel instead of fresco.
What is the busyness in the background?
Just more attendance, heads.
Okay,
Yeah, just his way of showing perspective, like there was a crowd.
And I'm sorry, who's holding Mary in this painting?
Right here.
No, who's holding Mary?
Oh, here. Yeah, I think that's probably Saint Peter. Okay, and this is probably John.
Okay.
John a lot of times is in red.
and Jesus is holding her.
Jesus with the soul of Mary.
Also,
Yes, yeah. I love this one, and the reason that I like it so much is because of her blue shroud or her
Yeah.
blue mantle. And in most of them, well, the sculptural ones were painted initially, if you all didn't know that. Arlini paint still exists, but the cathedrals were all painted in the Gothic period. And but this is just so colorful. Now here is John in this one. This would be Peter, and Mary, and then Christ again, the child, surrounded by angels. With these blue, in honor, I guess, of Mary, blue angels, blue wings. But really a special piece.
But no leg,
Huh?
no leg.
Okay, Gabriel always has the legs. Okay, we're gonna stretch out here. So there is another legend about her death. It's Western, not Eastern. So, everybody knows about doubting Thomas, right? Well, Thomas was preaching in India when she died. And he heard about her death and he came back to Jerusalem. Mary had requested, there are accounts of this in the Apocrypha, that she be buried in Gethsemane. And so he came back and gathered the apostles and wanted to see her tomb and insisted that they opened it. And of course, when they opened it, it was empty. So in the course of all of this, Peter Christus, who is a Flemish painter, this is like a conglomeration of a lot of story in this one. So this is Saint Peter already in his papal garb. This would be Thomas, and here is Mary reclining. However, when he comes and sees the empty grave, she sends an angel with her girdle to him to prove that she has been assumed and she is in heaven. And this is her soul going to heaven. So it is multiple scenes, multiple stories in this one painting, but it's the western side of where she was buried and St. Thomas.
Who's the little finger in the front? Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
I did look this up and I couldn't get any more analysis on it than I told you. And this is Rembrandt's exquisite dry point etching of her death. So I have something to show you. I'm going to pass the Apocrypha around. This is the New Testament. There's an Old Testament one. It's 800 pages. In tiny print. If you haven't seen it, you can look at it, look through it. And this is an icon that I own per Dormition Assumption. And I'll pass it around and you can look at it if you'll hold it by the frame.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Jesus again holding
Mhm.
her soul.
Yes, that the bottom, it's sad in legend that she died in the fall, and this was actually done. I bought it in Taos. There used to be a museum of Christian art there, and it was done by a woman. She wasn't there. That had studied in Russia, and she was a real icon painter. And there are definite restrictions on what you can do and what you cannot do, as you know. But it's said that in legend that she died in the fall. So you see in this the fall leaves in the bottom at her tomb, and then of course that's Christ holding her as a child for souls. She goes into heaven. So we're moving to the Assumption, which is in this. The Assumption has been. Well, let me go back to sinlessness. It was by the 4th century, it was believed that Mary was sinless. And there was a debate over whether this was original sin or personal sin. And in the 5th century, St. Augustine wrote that she was freed from personal sin. And by the 10th century, by the year 1000, the Catholic Church decided that she was sinless, period. So that is why she was able to be assumed into heaven. It begs the question of whether we all get assumed into heaven, right? Isn't that kind of what we hope for? I don't know. Anyway, it's fun to think about. So here's some of the different dogmas from the popes at different periods that are confirming her assumption. Pope, the 9th Pope, this was in 1854, and that was really the turning point for this becoming a dogma of the Catholic Church. So the Marian dogmas are, she is the mother of God, therefore, the Immaculate Conception, her Immaculate Conception, perpetual virginity, and the Assumption. The Queen of Heaven, which I'm going to show you later, is not one of the dogmas. So the Assumption, I want to talk about just for a second, the Council of Trent and Protestantism. Protestantism was probably about the greatest thing that ever happened to the Catholic Church and also to art, because it threatened the church. The church was already losing because of indulgences, various crimes against the church, the behaviors of the popes, various doctrines, you know, that you had to go to the Pope to hear your prayers, to be cleansed of sin, you had to confess. All of that was, people were turning against that. So the Protestant faith re-inspired the Catholic Church to make some reforms, and this was done at the Council of Trent in 1545. And the Council of Trent, supposedly they got rid of indulgences, they straightened out some of the violations. And they also tried to restrict what artists could do. Like, how far can you go into legend that's not actually documented in the Bible? And of course, artists paid no attention to this, but the other side of it was they wanted these elaborate, dramatic, gorgeous paintings done to bring the faithful back to the church and to bring to bring the faithful back and to cause the unfaithful to go to their knees. And so I'm going to start with these Assumption paintings, and they're all done after the Council of Trent and most in the Baroque period. And the Baroque period started about 1600. It followed the Mannerist period, which is really kind of where El Greco is. And they, there was the High Renaissance, then the Mannerism, and then the Baroque. But he borders a lot of Baroque in terms of color and in terms of also just the drama. So we start to see the Assumption, and these are powerful paintings. They're extremely large. They're most of the time on altars or in chapels, and Mary has been assumed into heaven. Usually the apostles are watching. They are here just stunned that she's not in the tomb. Some are looking at the tomb, some are looking at her. And one of the things that, I guess we need to define is Ascension and Assumption. Ascension is what Christ did. Christ ascended into heaven, and that is by his own divine power or being, as being the Son of God. Mary was assumed, and she needed help. She was taken by, for the most part, in paintings, angels. There are some stories where she is lifted in a cloud, so you'll see different versions. She is here still in her Marian blue. And I might mention Mariology, the word. This started after the Council of Ephesus, and it was in 431, where it was called Mariology. It was the prayers to Mary. And I have, here they are, 2 rosaries to pass around. I'm sure probably a lot of you have rosaries. I had this little Catholic period of 4 years. I was never confirmed that I was painting female saints, and I got so into all of this. But they're very beautiful, and there's certain ways you pray, and I really don't remember it. I did it a little bit, but you can look at them. But the rosary, there were prayer robes that the Desert Fathers used that were knotted. And then there was a legend that Mary came in an apparition with the rosary to a Dominican monk. This would have been in the early, early Christian period, early medieval period. And that was when the rosary became more popular, and it just grew with the growth of Mary and the belief in her as an intercessor. And that you prayed with the rosary and your prayers went straight to Mary.
I have a small prayer book given to me by some former Roman Catholics, and every prayer in it is It's all the Mariology.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
all there.
yeah, it's fascinating, the history of the church, this. So let's run through these Baroque paintings of the Assumption. This is Titian's, and I want to point out that in the Baroque period, and particularly in Venice, in Florence and Rome, there was always the argument over what's more important, line or color. Michelangelo believed color, Da Vinci believed line. And in the Venice, color reigns. So keep your eye on the Venetian paintings as we go. And also in the Queen of Heaven and in the Sacre Conversations of the Venetian paintings and this glorious use of color. So here she is, she's surrounded by angels, but she's on clouds. On her way to Jesus. I'm going to show you two Rubens. Reuben, I'm going to use the word flamboyant, there's no other word. And he is always just over the top with expression, with movement in the figures, this drama. And I want to point out that we start to see Peter in papal colors, in the dark blue, bluish purple, and in the gold. And all of these other figures, I guess that is John, and that's probably Mary Magdalene and other apostles. But she is just in a swoon going up into heaven.
It's very Magdalene were there because if he's really flamboyant, he's really dramatic.
Right there.
Yeah.
Well, she's usually in red. John's usually in red.
They both very white, and she's blonde. Mary appears to be a blonde lady in there.
She's head rolled back, yeah. I think your head would roll back if you were saved and you Dottie. Oh, I went to mention, this is in our National Gallery, and it's small, 46, yeah, 48 inches. I call that small. And this is done for the Church of Cathedral of Our Lady, which is Notre Dame in Antwerp. And it is enormous, 16 feet. You can see the similarities. He's inspired by the first one. Look at the composition. So somebody saw the first one and commissioned the second one, don't you think?
Yeah.
This is my favorite. It's simple. It's just gorgeous. This Murillo, the Spanish painter, Baroque period. He was a contemporary of Velázquez, which I'm sure all of you know, but I think this is just gorgeous. It's interesting that Mary is shown young again. And again, this is that whole perpetual virginity thread going through. Remember, we were seeing her for a while as a nun. Remember, an older woman covered, and also in the very early announcing of her death where Gabriel comes, she's an older woman, but then in the Assumption, she's fresh. This is, Mary is really in a free-for-all fall here. If you see this close up, it is a ceiling painting. And it's huge, 35 feet in width, 35, 39. These were very popular in the Baroque and Rococo period. Rococo's following the Baroque. And this is surrounded by strange figures, and a lot of them are nude, which I don't know that, I guess heaven there, it doesn't matter if you're dressed, right? I don't know. But anyway, that's one of the more dramatic ways of showing her. And there are many churches that have the Assumption of Mary as a ceiling fresco. And there are many churches dedicated to the Feast of the Assumption. Okay, Queen of Heaven, the coronation. The feast day is August 22nd. This was the latest of the three, the Dormition, the Assumption, and the Queen of Heaven, to become popular. And this really wasn't popular, although there were occasional images of it, until the Gothic period. This is a very early icon from St. Mary Major. This is Santa Maria Maggiore, one of the oldest churches in Rome, Christian churches, and it's one of the ones that has this gorgeous whole cycle of the early Christian church in mosaic. And she was considered the protectress of Rome, and the icon was repainted in the Gothic period. So the additions of the cross, I guess that's the Star of David, maybe, and the crowns, the elaboration in there is Gothic. But as far as being a protectress, that's hard for me to say. She is, that's an early piece, an early icon. So the Queen of Heaven, there are a few early associations of crowns. We know the history of the crown, the laurel crown from the Greek games, the Olympic Games, that was the crown of victory. And there was also the crown of course, of royalty. And Gregory donated this golden crown to one of the images in St. Peter's in the 8th century. And then the real spread of it was in the 13th century and through the Counter-Reformation. One of there are three biblical verses. That one is in the Song of Songs, one in Psalms, and one in Revelation, which I will get to in a few minutes, that associate her with being the Queen of Heaven. Yeah, it's an association, it's not a literal wording. So this is a very interesting piece. We have hardly any Christian art that is, thank you. Everybody see this?
Gorgeous.
That was done in England. And England was Catholic, of course, until the Reformation and Henry VIII. And to see a religious piece, it's just very unusual. We just don't see them. They're all from Spain and Italy and Germany and other places. So this is Mary reclining, and the crown is being lowered from heaven. And it has the features are very unusual if you see them close up. They're very general. They almost childlike, the placement of the eyes and nose. But this is from an illumination from a manuscript, and it's just a very special piece. Very, very early for this also, and to come out of England. So let's look at the one window. This survived the fire of Chartres of 1190, and it was not it was damaged, but it was able to be reused. And here you see Mary holding Christ and the crown on her head, and the dove of the Holy Spirit above her. And of course, Chartres has 160 stained glass windows, and they're all amazing, and blue being the dominant color for Mary. So I have a detail of this, and in the early 1900s, it was had to be reconstructed. I'm not sure, there was some damage or some of the leading, and her face used to be upright, and when they refurbished it or restored it, it became this slight tilt. So it's very unusual, but she's definitely looking at us. And this is a period where painting was done behind the glass, and so you see some variations in color. It's not just clear glass everywhere. So if we're going to look at Rome, this is the last of the big Gothic cathedrals date-wise to be started. And this is the portal of the Mary, the Mother of God. So I want you to see, this is called the Trumeau. It supposedly holds up the lintel, which, you know, it can be hard to do, hold up all this. It actually rests on various piers. So we're going to look at this, which is most unusual first, and then we'll go back to the Trumeau. And the figures on the sides are the ancestors of Mary, and on the other side, King Solomon, Queen of Sheba, and believe it or not, King Herod, and the three Magi. So it's an interesting selection of characters. There's a little more detail here. This is limestone. It has a yellowish cast in this photograph. It's not quite that yellow. But look at the sculpture on top. And this is completely terrible color. It's not silver, but it's what I could get. So this is called the marriage of Christ and the church being Mary. And he is seen here crowning her, surrounded by angels. And this is again the growth of this concept of Mary being such a part of the church and the establishment of the early church, and this tradition of her being an intercessor, and the magnification of her importance. This is not dogma, Queen of Heaven. This is the Trumeau. You can see that she's holding the Christ child. He is not looking at us, she is. And she was holding initially a pomegranate. Pomegranate is the symbol of resurrection and eternal life in the Christian tradition. Just refreshing you, we saw this early on. The two figures on the right are the Visitation. This is the church it's from, with Mary and Elizabeth. The two on the left are the Annunciation. The three different sculptures on this, as you can tell. Just a reminder of where that is. So going back to Amiens, this is the Trumeau there. And you see that Mary is looking at us, so is Christ. Christ is holding the orb here, orb being a symbol of the earth. He is king of all the earth. And she is stomping on evil. So this goes back to Eve. Evil is maybe a serpent, but it has a human head. You know, the Romanesque churches were, for the most part, named after saints. Saint Stephen, Saint Lazare, Saint Pierre, Saint Mark, the list went on. And or of the town they were in, like the Durham Cathedral. And the usual subject matter was, the most popular was the Last Judgment. So in the Romanesque period, when you approached a beautiful Romanesque church like at Autun, the tympanum at the top of the main portal was the Last Judgment, and there were all these figures being cast into hell. And then we turn around in the Gothic period and we see all of this beautiful, uplifting sculpture of Mary and the story of her life and the association with her intercessory abilities, I guess you'd call it, or the prayers to her, the importance of her. She became extremely important after the Gothic period, and particularly after the Council of Trent. This is an early Gothic, well, I guess it would be early 14th century, kind of late Gothic, but it falls in that period of Rayonnant flamboyant style. It's called the courtly style. It's the style of the period of Sainte-Chapelle, and I'm sure you're familiar with Sainte-Chapelle, where everything was elaborate. And the figures of the sculptural figures always had this contrapposto and this shift and this elegant move through them. However, this figure gets a lot of criticism. This is exactly my height, and she's way up on a pedestal in Notre Dame, the Virgin of Paris, she's called. But if you look at her carefully, there's no way her legs support the sway of her body and the weight of the child. So it gets a lot of criticism in the art world, although it's beautiful. And let me show you a detail of her face. Look at this. And he's holding an oar and she's holding the scepter of the French monarchy. Queen of Heaven. Another beautiful tempera painting, the crowning of Mary. Mary is, the crowning took place in heaven after the Ascension, and Mary is no longer in blue in this particular one with Christ crowning her, surrounded by apostles and angels. This is an interesting piece. So we know the Magnificat, the Song of Mary, started with her, how am I worthy when she, to have the Son of God, I can't remember the quote exactly, when she was visiting Elizabeth and she felt John the Baptist jump in Elizabeth's womb. And this is Botticelli. We all love Botticelli, right? And this round shape is called a tondo in art. And she's being crowned here, which is unusual, but it's showing her riding the Magnificat with Christ guiding her hand. So his left hand is guiding her and his right hand has the pomegranate with the little tiny seeds. I don't know if you all can see those, but it's a really beautiful piece. There are 3 copies of this. One is in the Louvre, one in the Uffizi, and the other one is in the Morgan Library and Museum in New York. It's overwhelming, the, I guess, translation of it. So Mary's being assumed, clouds and angels, and she's in blue again. She's again young. This is Christ holding the crown with God the Father. And here is the dove of the Holy Spirit. So if you look at the composition of this, it's an inverted triangle. Oh, yeah. This was really unusual because the Renaissance, the triangle, the base was the heavy part and the top was the light part. So if you draw an imaginary line around here and around here, it's a heart. And she has her hand on it. So it's just, Velasquez knew what he was doing. He was a serious Catholic. He was in the Order of Santiago, which was a great honor in Spain. And this is just, I think, an exceptional piece of her.
At what point did the angels really become almost cherubs? And just with the wings, did that just morph?
I think the angels as traditional, looking more like people.
Yeah.
In the Gothic period, that they became less important and the cloud became more important in the Baroque. The Assumption was more dramatic with the cloud. Because you see a lot of the cloud. So there's one more biblical quote and a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars, and she was with child. Well, this is very confusing, and it's one of those biblical passages that artists adopt that possibly does not refer to Mary. So here's one of the beautiful stained glass windows. This is from Australia, Sydney. And you see Mary standing on the moon with a crown of 12 stars. And this would of course be the apostles.
It's got the serpent under her feet.
Mhm. Standing on evil. But this is not acceptable theology with Mary. It is acceptable in Revelation, but anyway, had to clear this with Scott. Okay, some conversations. This is our last segment here of my talking about Mary, and I could, as I said, I could go on for 3 years. This became popular only in the Renaissance and after. It didn't happen before. And of course, everything with Mary grew. The focus on her, what she could do, what she participated in, where she was. And in the Renaissance, she had conversations, usually quiet ones in the Renaissance, with various saints and sometimes with donors. So here she is with Saint Lucy and one of the bishops from Florence and Saint Francis and John the Baptist. And John, this is complete Renaissance. If you think about the order of things, the balance, the symmetry, this is, I would consider this middle early Renaissance being 1400 to maybe 1475. And this would kind of be smack in the middle. And then, of course, it takes off with Da Vinci's big 3 paintings, including the Madonna and the Annunciation, and the Last Supper were 1498. So they were before 1500. 1500 is really the boom of the high Renaissance, where you start seeing more Michelangelo and Raphael and the bigger figures. But Veneziano. Veneziano was one of the famous middle early Renaissance artists. And this is quiet with John the Baptist pointing towards Mary and Jesus. So just look at the composition and we're going to go from there. And Saint Lucy, she was the patron saint of Venice, and she was Saint Lucy and Saint Margaret and many other of the female saints were martyred because they refused to have sex with the emperors or the heads of the church at the time. And they were tortured. And she apparently this is horrible, her eyes were pulled out. And she's always shown holding a tray with 2 eyeballs. And she is in a lot of the Renaissance and Gothic and Baroque paintings. And these traditions about the saints, a lot of them come from the Golden Legend. That was a medieval book written by actually a theologian. It's interesting about that too. Okay, the San Sicario altarpiece by Bellini. Bellini was late early Renaissance and beginning high Renaissance. This is 1505. That falls right into the category of the beginning of the Sistine Chapel. He was an incredible artist. He lived to be really old. He did this altarpiece when he was 74 years old. And I'm going to show you a lot of images of it because it's so beautiful. So we have here Saint Peter. Notice that he's in his papal colors. He is head of the church, the spiritual head of the church. And this is Saint Jerome, who was one of the early doctors of the church, translated the Bible into Latin. And he is the representative of the governmental or ecclesiastical side of the church. Here's Saint Lucy again with her tray of eyeballs. And this is Saint Catherine with her wheel. She was tortured on a wheel. And this angel is playing music. The reason the music in there is for harmony. So sacra conversations are meant to be silent conversations between more meditative more prayerful with whoever is there and the Virgin and Child. So let's look at some details that is closer up. So back to Venice. What did I say about Venice and the color in the Baroque period? You just see it. Red is red, blue is blue, yellow is yellow, gold is gold. You know, the color is just gorgeous in Venetian Baroque paintings and Renaissance. And look at the Virgin and Child. So we're used to seeing the child Jesus as a small adult, right, with more of an adult face. So in the Renaissance, and you start to see, particularly high Renaissance, you start to see more of a baby look or a young sort of toddler. And here he is already blessing. And Mary is looking down at whoever might be visiting her or trying to communicate with her. If we go back to, see, this is high. So she's looking at whoever might be standing down in front of her, making eye contact. Remember that she is an intercessor. And look at the color. So I'm going to go back one more time. This is the church. This is all trompe-l'oeil painting to look like the depth of another receding arch behind the Virgin. Here it is in the church. Now, San Sicario. More paintings added, but you can see the scale. Now this, all of these is 16 feet, so the scale is huge if we look at what's. And my last one is Titian. And again, this is Venice. And it's a little different in composition. So you can see that our story is a diagonal. The Virgin is holding the child and they're looking with Saint Peter down at the sorrow, kneeling. Here's his family, his brother and his children and wife. And this is someone carrying the flag. This is a symbol not only of the Pesaro family, the coat of arms, but also the Medici, or one of the popes of the Medici. And these columns are supposed to be the gateway into heaven, symbolic in the painting. But you see that the baby Jesus is looking this way. This is Saint Anthony and Saint Francis. He's looking this way, like a child, just not paying much attention, acting like a baby. And she is looking down at Pesaro, who is praying to her through Saint Peter. So it's just an incredible piece. And if we look at the top, there are two angels in this dark cloud holding a cross. And this is the foreboding of what's to come. Do you all know the sorrows of Mary? The first one is when she was in the temple. I took Christ to the temple and got the warning from Simeon that a sword would pierce her soul. And then there is the flight into Egypt, the fear, the running away from the massacre. Then I think the next one is when Jesus disappears in the temple. Then there's the condemnation and the crucifixion, the deposition and the burial. All the seven sorrows of Mary.
Well, I'm gonna need to.
There we go.
That guy.